trusty black cat Percy in the chair next to me, and I have painted my face. This is the first part of our Halloween themed duo of videos. So as well as welcoming you to Lady Tower Whispers, welcome to an introduction to Vampire the Masquerade. I did consider doing what would make sense, which was to dress as a vampire rather than some kind of witch. But quite honestly, I don't find vampires exciting to dress up as. I find them fascinating as a mythological creature in pop culture, in books, but I just don't enjoy dressing up as them. I don't think you can have as much fun. Of course there are vampires that definitely look interesting, but I just don't think I would do them justice. So today I've decided to paint my face with symbols and runes, giving myself what may look like a monobrow, and just have a bit of fun. I'm wearing my trick-or-treat Halloween jumper in honour of it being Halloween in a few days, so I thought it would set the tone quite nicely. Before we head into the first part of this introduction into a new role-playing system, or new to me anyway, not new to the world, just a little bit of a disclaimer actually. So firstly, there will definitely be references to blood and some horror themes, sex, so just to pre-warn you of that. And as well as that, I do not know very much about Vampire the Masquerade. I am very new to it. I've done quite a bit of research and I've got a lot of info from friends and my partner, but I don't know the game very well. I'm learning about it. So I am summarising a lot of the information. I am simplifying it. It is such a lore-heavy game. There's entire book series on it, like individual books that delve into the lore, that I would be here for weeks and months going into it all. So for those of you who don't know the game, there is so much more than what I'm going to cover over these next few videos. And for those of you that do know the game, I am well aware that I am simplifying a lot of this to make sure that it's not confusing to people, that I'm not muddying the waters. I am trying to cover the things that you would need to know as a new character. Of course, as with most role-playing, it might help not to have too much information because your character will likely not know all of the lore of the game that it's roleplay heavy, very politics heavy. Your goals orient the game. So you and your fellow players are all vampires in a modern day setting. I believe there are other versions of vampire, other campaigns that are set in other eras, like the Victorian era, that kind of thing, but generally it's set in the modern day. I know that my DM's game is set in 2006, I believe. I can't remember the city. It might be Montreal, something like that. So as well as the players, there is a DM. However, they are referred to as either a GM, a game master, or more commonly, the storyteller. And that's because it is very story driven, as opposed to adventure driven. So they are referred to as a storyteller, and they drive the game, whilst you and your fellow players would usually come together as a group of young vampires. That's not necessarily how it will always go, because the game's focus is on each player's character's motivations. Those motivations might keep you separate to others. You might not play it as cooperatively as you play D&D. Your personal motivations, your goals, your history, your wants, they are what drive the game and drive the story. So you might come together with your fellow players. That tends to be the way it goes, at least to begin with, but you also might not. It's very much a game of dark alleyways and nightclubs and abandoned warehouses. Very dark. It's quite politically driven. Your character doesn't necessarily have to be political, but it is how all of these characters and the machinations of the city that you're in come together, and very personal gain driven. You will have a goal or a desire, whether that's to own a series of nightclubs, whether that's to raise a cult of humans that worship you and follow you around. You have a personal goal, a dream. It could be to find out who your sire is. It could be to make a bunch of new vampires. And the game is about how that works amongst your other players, how their goals might affect you and hinder you or help you. And of course there are outside vampire forces as well that are creating conflict. It does seem to be very loosely designed so that you could play almost any kind of pop culture vampire that you've come across. David from The Lost Boys, Spike or Angel from Buffy, Blade, Lestat, Louis. There's likely a type of vampire that fits that kind of mould. As I mentioned, because it's very story driven, very personal, goal driven, your backstory is really, really important here. Your life as a human, your turning, how you became a vampire is really important. It might be that you don't know, but that's, something that drives you. You want to know, you want to find out. Your goals and motivations as a vampire are so important, as it basically drives the story and the game. You're not given a quest to go on with your fellow adventurers. You are telling your storyteller what you as much blood. There is less blood in an animal than there is a human, and it's not going to feel as good. So drinking human blood, so drinking from a human or from another vampire, is basically described as feeling like you're having sex, and it feels twice as good when you drink from a vampire, and it does not feel that way when you drink from an animal. But that is a choice that you could make. The average human has 10 points of blood in their body. Draining 3 points of that blood will make them quite ill. Draining 4 points of that blood means that they would have to go to the hospital and stay for a little while, and any more than that would require an immediate blood transfusion for them to survive, because you would be draining half the blood from their body or more. So vampires have a blood pool that dictates a lot of things for them. They also have humanity. So this dictates how moral you are and how quickly you start doing morally questionable things. So you will start on a certain level of humanity, and any time that you act outside of your moral compass, which is dictated by that level of humanity, you would make what's called a humanity roll to see if you stay at your current humanity level or if you drop down. The further down the lack of humanity you get, the less humanity that you have, the more you start succumbing to that inner beast, and at a certain level, you would become the beast. You're more beast than man, and your character is essentially now retired, as it's unplayable. The only thing that you want now is to feed, so you've become like a rabid dog almost. So it's really key to try and keep your humanity at a steady level that fits your character, and not let it drop. Like any good role-playing game, there is of course a dice system. Because what kind of role-playing game would be fun if you aren't rolling a few dice? With vampires specifically, it is a system of D10s. So a D10 is the only dice that you'll be rolling. I am just going to pop these away though before they continue rattling. So the way that works is that on your character sheet there will be a certain amount of points or pips that you have against your various skills, attributes, powers, which are known as disciplines, and this will dictate how many D10s you're allowed to roll. When you roll to do anything, you will require a certain number of successes to succeed in what you're trying to do. And of course the difficulty of what you're trying to do will dictate how many successes you need. On the D10, a 6 or higher is a success, a 5 or lower is a failure. As well as that, a 10 is a critical success, which I believe, depending on the version of the game, will allow you to re-roll one dice. And a 1 is a critical failure, which actually counts against your successes. So if you rolled 3 6s, all of the rest were 2s, and then a single 1, you would have actually rolled 2 6s, which would be 2 successes, which likely won't have passed. We won't be covering the character sheet in this video. I am going to save that for the second video, where we get into a little bit more about what determines your vampire, what type of vampire, all of the different options available to you, the different skills, the powers that I mentioned, how the blood pool and humanity points works out. Today is very much going to be a lot of lore with curated a set of rules to ensure that that stays the case, which they believe all vampires should follow. They are the most powerful organisation of vampires, and they control most, but not all, of the cities in the world. Opposite to that, we have the Sabbat. So they believe essentially that vampires are all monsters, and they shouldn't have to hide. They shouldn't have to hide who they are. Shouldn't have to hide from the humans. They should just embrace that they are monsters and accept who they are. Between these two, there has been a slow war going on between the Sabbat and the Camarilla, which is probably going to affect any vampire game that you take part in. Now, there is a third group of vampires called the Anarchs. They essentially somewhat agree with the Camarilla. They believe that vampires should stay hidden, that they shouldn't reveal themselves to humans. However, they don't want to follow their rules, they don't want to be told what to do, and they certainly don't want to get involved in any kind of war. So they stay hidden, they don't reveal themselves to humans, but they keep separate from both the Camarilla and the Sabbat and sort of leave them to it, essentially. We will be focusing on the Camarilla vampires because, again, that's the game that my partner would be playing in. We would be Camarilla vampires, so that's what I'm going to focus my attention and information on. There are a few terms that you should probably be aware of as we go along. So vampires call themselves kindred. They call humans kine. Being turned into a vampire is called the embrace. A vampire who embraces a human is that new vampire's sire. And the vampire who has been turned is that sire's childer. So we have kindred is vampires, kine are humans, sires are the creators of a vampire, and a childer is the vampire that was created by another vampire. Throughout this video I will be referring to two different books. So the first one being this, Vampire the Masquerade, which I will read the back of. There will come a time when the curse of the one above will not be tolerated further, when the lineage of Cain will end, when the blood of Cain will be weak, and there will be no embracing for these childer, for their blood will run like water, and the potence in it will wither. Then you know in this time that Gehenna will soon be upon you. The Book of Nod. So throughout these two parts, I will be referencing two books. The first one being this Vampire the Masquerade book. Very simple cover. It has a lot of information that I obviously won't be covering, but I do want to show you some of the artwork. I did just basically knock over my entire setup with this book, which I will try not to do again. But some of the artwork is stunning. It's all very black and white. It gets quite dark. It's a really lovely laid out book. And there are a few bits that I wanted to read out to you. If I can find them. not a vampire. When a game session ends, put away the books, pack away the dice, enjoy the rest of your life, and let other people enjoy theirs. For the 99.9999% of you who are sufficiently well adjusted not to need such a ridiculous disclaimer, have fun. Which I just thought was so cool. Some more gorgeous artwork here. I am going to read you a couple of paragraphs of the introduction as well. Vampires. Blood-sucking corpses returned from the grave to feast on the blood of the living. Monsters damned to hell who avoid their punishment through life unlawfully stolen. Erotic predators who take their sustenance from innocent, struggling, or perhaps willing, men and women. Since time's beginning, humanity has spoken of the vampire, the undead, the demonic spirit embodied in human flesh. The corpse risen from its grave, possessed of a burning hunger for warm blood. From Hungary to Hong Kong, from New Delhi to New York, people throughout the world have experienced chills of delicious terror, contemplating the deeds of the night-stalking vampire. The vampire has haunted novels, movies, TV series, video games, clothing, even breakfast cereal. But these stories are myths, right? Wrong. Vampires have walked among us from prehistoric times. They walk among us still. They have fought a great and secret war since the earliest nights of human history, and this eternal struggle's final outcome may determine humanity's future or its ultimate damnation. Which is just such a gorgeous introduction to a game. So that is one book I will be referencing. The other one is this truly gorgeous edition. It's completely sort of like plain cover, but it is leather. It has got the gilded sprayed edges, which is beautiful. But this one has a lot more information in it. The artwork is gorgeous. There's one particular type of vampire. But it is quite delicate. I have been lent this, so I do have to be really, really careful with it. So in this game, even though you are all vampires, not all vampires are the same. There are different clans of vampires, which I suppose are a little bit like the classes in D&D, as of course you're all the same race, but there isn't really a direct correlation between them. But clans are different types of vampires. I will be covering those in detail in the next video, where we'll get down to the nitty-gritty of what you need to know to create your vampire character. But I am going to finish this video on another bit of a lore dump, just because I think it's a nice way to end the video, and it will lead very nicely into the next. So, as mentioned previously, vampires in this game have their own histories, their own origin story, and even histories and explanations for a lot of human events as well. So the origins and the lore and even the dates of the histories are all quite contradictory, and it does seem to be purposely confusing, and there are in fact some vampires and vampire clans that believe in different origin stories, but the main one, and the one that is widely accepted as the truth, is the origin story of Cain. So according to this origin story, Cain, the son of each time Cain refused. Each one of those angels then cursed him in a different way that made him a vampire. So things like, can't go out in the day, drinks blood to survive, these were curses that the angels put on him that created the first and original vampire. The vampires that were turned by Cain, his child, are referred to as the second generation vampires. The ones that they turned their child are third generation, and so on and so forth. The third generation is where it gets juicy. So essentially the third generation vampires all got together and killed all of the second generation vampires, which massively annoyed Cain. So Cain basically curses each of those third generation vampires in a different way, and all of their children are cursed in the same way, which is how the clans were formed, because each of those curses turned those vampires into a different type of vampire. And they each have this curse that then gets passed on to any child that they create. So the way the curses and the clans worked, so for example, there is a third generation vampire, and I will have to consult my notes for this, Absamiliard, who was incredibly handsome, like stunning, and Cain cursed him to be ugly and warped, and so all of Absamiliard's childers were cursed in the same way, and that is how the clan Nosferatu came to fruition. So Absamiliard is the original Nosferatu clan vampire, and the rest of his children form the Nosferatu clan. And that's how the clans were formed. Each of those third generation vampires were cursed, as were all of their children, and they were each cursed in a different way, which is how they have those differences to the other clans. And that is where we will leave it for today, because that will very nicely introduce us to the clans in the next video. I really hope you've enjoyed this first part of an introduction into Vampire the Masquerade. I am personally quite fascinated by this game. It is dark, it is gritty, it is not for the faint-hearted. I know D&D can get intense, but it doesn't often get dark, and that is probably the best word to describe Vampire. There is some artwork in here that I quite literally would not be able to show you. It's beyond, PG-18. So I'm really looking forward to diving deeper into the game. Like I say, part 2, we will be covering the different clans, their different attributes and powers. I will give you a look at the character sheet itself, show you all the different skills and the way that that works, because it is vastly different to D&D, and talk to you how each of those things works. Some things to consider when creating your character, so that will very nicely segue to my creating a character series in a few weeks' time. For now, thank you so much for watching this video. I know it's very different to my usual